More practice. Cape Economics, Unit 2. This is the 2017 past paper, and we're going to take a look at it. But the questions are generally fairly long, so I'm probably just only going to do question 1, which is models of macroeconomy. Right, so let's get to it. So get your past paper, 2017 paper 2, and let's go. Now the first question on this paper says state 2 determinants of investment. Okay, so we know that one determinant is the accelerator principle, because investment, if you recall, is the capital output ratio times the change in the level of income. So that's the accelerator principle. We also know that we could use the marginal efficiency of investment, we call the MEI, which is basically just a schedule of the internal rates of return that you would expect on each capital project. So you set up a schedule showing the expected internal rates, so that you try to equate the cost of the investment with the expected incomes. Now, of course, you could have used, you could have stated, for example, the durability of the capital assets, the rate of innovation, in other words, how regular does innovation changes occur, the degree of expectation within the economy itself, and of course the interest rates. So you had lots of possibilities to write for that question. All right, so let's move to part 2, which says distinguish between gross domestic product and gross national product. So GDP versus GNP. Now the question says distinguish. So which means that we have a given answer that sorts of either show what is similar or what is dissimilar about these two variables. So one distinguishing feature we know for sure is that GDP is the sum of all the output generated within the geographical boundaries of a country. Whereas GNP is the sum of all the output generated by the citizens of that country, regardless to their geographical location, in other words, regardless of where they live in the world. Wherever they generate as citizens of that country will make up the GNP. Another distinguishing feature is that GDP actually measures the economic growth of the economy, right? How the country, how that country's economy grew from one year to the next. However, GNP will measure the wealth generated by these citizens from one year to the next. I mean, we could give a third one, which is probably a simple one, that GDP can be measured by the formula C plus G plus I plus NX, the spending or expenditure function. But GNP would be GDP minus the net property income from abroad. So that's distinguishing because GDP is obviously a part of GNP, or I should say GNP is GDP minus something. All right, so that's your answer to part 2. Now part B 1 says describe each of the following approaches which are used to measure GDP, and they gave us 2, right? One was the income approach, the other one was the expenditure approach. So let's start with the income approach. So the income approach is basically states that you add up all the incomes earned by all of the factors of production in that economy, and that answer should be equivalent to the total output generated by the economy, by that country. In other words, GDP is simply the sum of all of the earnings of the factories, right? So the sum of the rents, the wages, the interest, and the profits. Now, remember, it's only 3 marks, so you ain't got to write a thesis, all right? Expenditure, on the other hand, is the sum of all the spending generated by the economic agents, right? The people who own the factors of production within that economy. And that should also total the value of the output produced. So in other words, your expenditure approach should give you the same answer as your income approach. So how do we then measure the expenditure? Well, we all know the expenditure function. It is GDP is equal to the sum of C plus G plus I plus an X, which is basically household expenditure, government expenditure, investment expenditure, and net export expenditure. So there you have it, part 2 of that question. Now, part C of the question says, explain one way in which growth in a country's GDP may negatively impact a country's standard of living. Now, you'd be probably wondering, well, the country making good money, why would that impact people's standard of living negatively? So let's explore it. So we realize that an economy that is experiencing rapid growth, right? That rapid growth could have been due to placing a lot of stress on the labor to increase and sustain productivity levels. And if you are doing that, if the workers are under constant stress, then you're going to have the negative spin-off of them getting stressed out, as it were, or having medical conditions that are based on stress, right? So their health will decline. So they may get strokes, high blood pressure, heart failure, migraines, and some people are actually going to binge when they're under stress. So you're talking about obesity, or some people don't eat at all, so they get anorexic, and whole set of things go on there, right? So you have these things, and the problem here is that this is going to affect their standard of living, because the money that they're earning, all this money that they're earning, is now going to have to go into paying medical bills rather than giving them leisure or giving them an opportunity to invest in another project. All right, so that is how the growth in a country can negatively impact the standard of living. All right, part D says, well, using a standard 45-degree Keynesian cross diagram, explain how equilibrium is reached between actual expenditure and income. So I've drawn the diagram already, so you don't have to worry about it. So we have the 45-degree line, which is that red line, and we have the expenditure line, which is C plus BY, right? Autonomous consumption plus induced consumption. And then we're showing that where these two lines is considered to be the full employment line, right? Where national income is equal to aggregate expenditure. And basically that the same way the country reaches this point is at its maximum, right? If you remember the classical theory. Even though there's a Keynesian model, they both reach the same conclusion at this point. So that's the diagram. So let's put a little, labeling on it. So I've labeled those lines, but we could also indicate what these two spaces here mean. Like, what's this space and what's this space, right? So let's do that now. Right. So this space here, the one at the top, which is to the right of the full employment line, suggests then that the economy has that based on this chart, that if there's excess incomes, it would mean that basically there's insufficient demand to spend that money. So in other words, people are demanding more than the country can produce. And this creates an inflationary gap, because obviously you're going to have to raise the prices, all right, in order to reduce demand. The other side of it is where you have excess inventories, or basically the people are demanding more than the incomes that they have. All right. So what happens is that you have insufficient income to meet the demand to allow you to get the things that you want. So this excess inventories in terms of factors will now be exploited by the firms, because they can pay low wages to get, pay at these low levels to get people to come and work. And that way you encourage people to come and work to increase production to meet their demands. All right, so this is now the deflationary gap, right? Where, the cost of things is so low that you can afford to expand your production. Anyway, let's write this out, because the answer one is just to one, draw the diagram, and two, explain. All right, so even though I do all the explain just now, so let's just look at the explanation in writing. So basically, in the case where the two will cross one another, and where they cross one another, we say that is the maximum GDP, and it's a point where obviously that GDP or national income is equal to the aggregate expenditure, which makes sense, right? Because you measure GDP by expenditure. And then it explains the position to the left, right? And it explains the position to the right, as I had indicated not too long ago. So there is your answer to that question, and that is the answer to question 1 of the 2017 economics, Cape Economics, paper 2. All right, so I just want to thank you and join me for question 2 a little later.